It's movie night, and we're back with the M. Night Shyamalan films from best to worst. This is number 6, Lady in the Water. This one would have been higher on my list, but I'm going to explain why it hit the 6th spot. I thought it would actually be higher on the list when I went back to rewatch all these films to give these reviews, and I actually thought films like The Village would be lower. And over time, when this movie first came out, I absolutely loved it. I still love it now. But there are some things, having watched it now again, that don't work, and there are some really nice elements in there. Let's get with the cast here. Bryce Dallas Howard plays Story, and Paul Giamatti plays Cleveland. And those are the two characters I'm going to focus on in this review, because all the other characters are very important pieces, but they're important as a collective, and they work better if you just watch the film. Trying to explain what they do and how they fit in is tough, and I'm going to explain why in this review. This story is a mythology slash fairy tale bedtime story that M. Night Shyamalan made up to tell his children, and he ended up developing it into a film. The screenplay for this film, you can tell, was very hard to pull off, and filming it, I think, for him was even harder. Even though it's in one location in his building that takes place with all these tenants and how things work together in this, the overall story of this being a bedtime story, a fairy tale, and a mythology, it works on a certain level, but as a film, I think it probably would have been a lot better if it was actually a computer-generated film, an animated film, because the characters are so unique and out of this world. In some cases, just crazy that they come off very unbelievable, and it's hard to relate to them because they are truly characters, and they feel out of place in times because they're so eccentric and they're so, in many cases, one-dimensional. There's not a lot of depth to them because they all just play this role that fits into this overall story of this sea nymph called Story, which they refer to in the story as she's a Narf, what they call a Madam Narf, and she was sent to interact with Cleveland in a certain way to do something that was very strange in the film. And a lot of people didn't like this concept. And again, spoilers in this review, so we're going to get right into it. You think that she's sent to help Cleveland because Cleveland's family was murdered. There was an intruder that came into their house, murdered his wife and his children. And he has a stutter, and the only time he doesn't stutter is when he's in the presence of Story. He is a very, very good character. Paul Giamatti did a very good job of portraying a man who has lost his wife and his children, has his stutter. He just seems so stressed out. He just seems, his anxiety is just through the roof. He's just taking all these things, and he has suppressed his emotions. And Paul Giamatti, this is one of my favorite roles of his. He is unbelievably good in this movie. Unbelievably good in this movie. Bryce Dallas Howard is good, but she doesn't have a lot to work with because she's playing a sea nymph who is in a very strange position of trying to play something that is not of this world, but she has this innocence and this childlike quality to her, but at the same time she has to play like she's fearful of what's coming at her. She comes to this building, and which is the weirdest plot detail I think I've ever seen in a movie, to inspire a writer to write a book, because the book is going to change the world in very, very dramatic ways. And this guy, who is played by M. Night Shyamalan, he's the writer, which a lot of people, I said, didn't like that because he ended up putting himself as the writer who would change the world with his book. And she's basically here to inspire him with that. But not only is she here to inspire him, all the other characters have roles that play very intricate parts in his book being written. And just put him in place, because we don't actually see him go and write the book. This takes place in a very short time period, but all the characters have important jobs that they do, and they're trying to figure out their roles. All these tenants in this building have a role, a specific role that plays into mythology, and it's very much like a fairy tale. And some elements of that just do not work, and I personally did not like some of the characters that were in the story to make this thing up. It was very confusing. There was plot twists and turns in the story, because you will find out one person was supposed to do this, and then you find out scenes later, no, we were wrong about that. He wasn't supposed to do this. And another interesting thing about this movie is that it is exposition heavy. There is nothing left to the imagination for the audience to actually figure things out. each thing that happens next is explained via this Asian woman and her mother. And they literally, her mother knows this bedtime story that the movie is taking place, and she's basically telling you all the points of the bedtime story and all the creatures. And it's a very strange way of doing it, because they're essentially spoon feeding you the mythology and the bedtime story instead of you just experiencing it. So she's essentially setting up each scene, so when the scene actually comes that she's talking about, you already basically know what's going to happen. Now, some of the things that she knows about this in this bedtime story is that the creatures, and some of these creatures are pretty cool. There's what they call scrunts, these wolf-like characters that are made of grass. They literally come out of the grass, and whenever Story goes outside, they attack her. And those scrunts are being attacked by these, what they call tartutics, which is these monkey-like creatures that are made out of kind of like wood-type deals. They live in the trees, and they protect the narf, the sea nymph, from these scrunts. So it's a very, really strange film, but the creature designs are very, very good. The special effects for the time were very good. They still hold up pretty good today. And the great Eatlon, the giant eagle that comes in at the end of the movie to take Story back to what they call the blue world. This is where the sea nymphs and all these creatures originate from. When she comes in our world, she's from the blue world. The scrunts are from the blue world. The tartutic, the great Eatlon, the giant eagle that comes and grabs her at the end of the film, they are from this blue world. And I love that aspect of it, which is why it's where it's at on this list, because I like mythologies and fairy tales, and for this to be a bedtime story, it has a uniqueness to it that I feel like I couldn't not put it in this spot. And I actually thought films like After Earth and The Visit and even The Happening would be over this before I went back and rewatched all of them. And there's something about this story that is so heartwarming and good, but it's just not a very well put together package. There's some editing and pacing issues here and there, and again, you're spoon-fed exposition left and right, which making you not enjoy the film. You're kind of just watching it instead of interacting with it, because they're spoon-feeding you. You are not left to figure out anything on your own, because every time you think you're going to figure out something, they quickly tell you, no, that's wrong, and this is why it's wrong, and this is the right thing. And for a film goer, you want to be engaged in the story, and they kind of push you away, and it is like someone's telling you a bedtime story. Again, this is on purpose by M. Night. This is a style. He wanted it to feel like someone was telling you a story instead of you actually interacting with it and leaving things to the imagination. Another great thing about this film, James Newton Howard's score. Wow, it's beautiful. It's what makes this movie feel so unique. There are some themes and some cues in this film that, just thinking about it right now, sends chills up my spine and gives me goosebumps. It's so beautiful and fits so perfectly with some of these scenes, and especially when she's telling M. Night Shyamalan's character what he's going to be doing in the future with his book, and why he has to write this book, and that a future world leader is going to read that book and be inspired to become this great world leader. And this great world leader comes from reading M. Night Shyamalan's character's book, and he was not going to make it. And when she's revealing this to him, the music just adds the weight to it. It is so beautiful. It is worth it. The cinematography for this movie alone is worth watching it. Again, there are some very weird elements editing wise and frame wise, what he does with the camera, that don't quite make sense, but in a way it kind of does, because when you're telling the story, there are embellishments and there's things that are kind of out of frame, meaning if out of frame being in the story, you're telling half truths and you're exaggerating this and you're exaggerating that, and it plays well in this movie. There are things that happen in this movie where you're like, wow, that is really exaggerated, but that's what you would do in a bedtime story or a fairy tale or a mythology. Things are exaggerated over time, especially in mythology. Mythologies are exaggerated tremendously over generations. They change, and you can tell in this story that some of the elements is just someone's imagination just going haywire telling this story, because again, it is a bedtime story. And I think on that level of bedtime story, if you can go into the film thinking it's a bedtime story, it works really well. What doesn't work well, again, for me, some of the characters are just so underdeveloped, and they're kind of shoehorned into scenes, and you just have to buy that they are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. And Paul Giamatti's character is great because he is the audience, and it is remarkable how well he plays that, because he does play a man who is in disbelief, but he is kind of going along with it because he wants to help story, and the guilt inside of him of not being able to save his wife and child. I think this was his second chance to help this young girl's story, even though what she's doing, it's just mind-boggling him. He does not believe any of it. He's just going through the motions trying to help her. And again, that guilt from his family dying weighs into that. And there's a very emotional scene where Paul Giamatti breaks down and tells the story of what happened to his wife and kids. And with the score again with James Newton Howard, it's one of the most beautiful scenes I've ever seen. It makes me choke up every time I watch it. And the end of this movie, the last 10 minutes, is breathtakingly good. It's worth watching this movie just for the last 15 to 20 minutes, especially the last 10 minutes when that eagle comes in and the scrunts and the Tartuga are going at it, and it's raining by the pool area, and there's this party going on. It's beautifully put together. M. Night shines in those last 20 minutes. It is classic M. Night. And when that eagle comes in and takes her away, it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen packaged together. Again, it's not higher on the list because it is a very strange film, and I just felt like all of his other films were better put together imaginations of what M. Night is great at, with the twists and everything. The twist of this movie is actually the whole movie. The twist is that the entire movie is a bedtime story. So it doesn't have that classic M. Night Shyamalan twist. The whole movie is a twist. And I think it works on those levels. And again, I was pleasantly surprised that it still held up after all this time. But I actually give it a solid 2 thumbs up. If you have not seen Lady in the Water, I actually personally recommend it. It is not a film for everybody. It is definitely not perfect. But I think it's a very unique film, and it stands alone as one of M. Night's better pieces of work. That'll do it for this one. See you on the next movie night. Take care.